Evolution only wants us to live for 30 years, and there's a reason that we're only supposed to live for 30 years, and that's because if we go back in history, tens of thousands of years ago to the Stone Age, to where we were living in caves, we were allowed about 15 years to grow, to become strong, to become full size, and also to learn how to survive in the world. And at that point, we became sexually mature, we could reproduce, have children of our own, and then we were allowed another 15 years to raise the next generation, to protect them, to teach them how to survive. And then at the end of 30 years, when our children were then old enough to reproduce and have more children, at the ripe old age of 30 for us, we were simply another mouth to feed. So the evolutionary process led to certain things, the aging process beginning to kick in at 30. What happens at 30? What happens when we start to age? Well, one thing is our hearts become smaller. Another thing that happens is our lungs become smaller. Our hearing deteriorates. Our vision begins to change. We can't run quite as fast as we could. And in a world of the Stone Age, if you couldn't run as fast as everybody else, then it was likely that something was going to get you, and you would not survive. So the aging process, in order to prevent overpopulation, because we lived in a world where famine was always at our door, only allowed us 30 years of optimal health. The problem is, in the last 30 or 40,000 years, our genes haven't changed. If we look at our 25,000 genes that we possess as humans, 24,994 of them are just the same as they were 30 or 40,000 years ago. We are evolving, but very slowly. Evolution is a very slow process. So the same genes that existed in the Stone Age exist for us today. And what do those genes tell us about aging? That we should live for 30 years in optimal health, and then the aging process is going to kick in. So after the age of 30, we need to take steps to deal with the age-related genes so that we can grow older without aging past 30. Now, the diseases that are associated with aging don't occur suddenly. They just appear to. We can look at our lives as if we're living on the top of a cliff. And our lifestyle choices can help to determine how quickly we approach the edge of the cliff and then we fall off. Making proper lifestyle choices with respect to diet, exercise, weight control, blood pressure, stress management, things like that, we can slow this down. Or if we do something very unhealthful like smoking cigarettes, we can stop and we can move back from the cliff. But in any event, our lifestyle choices, to a far greater extent than we used to think in the past, can influence how well we age. Unfortunately, most of these diseases that are associated with the aging process don't manifest any symptoms until it's too late. So, for example, the leading cause of death in the developed world is heart attacks. Yet, only 1 out of 3 people has any symptoms whatsoever before experiencing a heart attack. 2/3 of people have no chest pain, have no skipped heartbeats or palpitations until the day they have a heart attack. And then of those people who've had no symptoms, half of them will die that day. So the problem that we have is these disease processes are going on in our bodies without letting us know that anything's going on. And then when they strike, they often erupt with sudden fury and occasionally with fatal results. The reason has to do with the rule of 80-20. This is a picture of an economist from Italy who around 1900 came up with what he referred to as the rule of 80-20. And what he did is he took the tax rolls from the province that he lived in Italy, and he was interested by the fact that it appeared that 80% of the property was owned by 20% of the population. And he looked at other townships and he found that this was true. He found that it was true throughout the entire country. And if we look at the GDP of the world, the gross domestic product, we find that the richest 20% of the people worldwide have approximately 80% of the assets of the world. And this applies not only to economics. In a business meeting, we know that we typically spend 80% of the time on 20% of the agenda. So the rule of 80-20 has many applications, and I began to think about the rule of 80-20 and this age-related process, and I wondered if there was some way that this could help to explain what happens to us as we age. If we look at heart disease, this leading cause of death being heart attacks, it's typically caused by the buildup of cholesterol deposits within our arteries. And we develop these blockages, and they begin as 10%, 20%. This looks like it's about a 50 or 60% blockage. Most cardiologists don't feel that these need to be treated surgically, opened up with stents or bypass, things like that, until they reach about an 80% blockage. Yet the problem is that while this 80% blockage is occurring, there are no symptoms. The same thing applies with respect to kidney failure. Kidney failure is caused by death of the nephrons, the kidney cells, and as they die, eventually the creatinine, which is a blood test we do, begins to rise. Yet it's really, if you lose 50% of your kidney function, you'll often have not a significant rise in your creatinine, so we don't know that there's a problem. With diabetes, type 2 diabetes results when the cells in the pancreas that form insulin gradually die. Yet we can lose 50% of the cells in our pancreas and our blood sugar remains completely normal. It's really only when we get past about 70 to 80% of the cells being gone that we begin to have elevations in blood sugar, and then diabetes can be diagnosed, but the damage has already been done. So we can look at what happens in medicine. There's a long period of time when damage is occurring. We're losing 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% of the functioning cells in the body, yet we're not losing a lot of the function. Yet there's this critical point where we've already lost 80% of the functioning cells, and at this point we develop symptoms, and when we develop symptoms, we go to the doctor, and the conventional practice of medicine today begins to treat things that we can see, yet 80% of the damage has already been done, and this is not an optimal situation. So there are steps that we can take in anti-aging medicine to turn this around. There are two specific pillars that I look to that can help us to prevent age and aging. The first pillar is prevention. These are things that you can typically do yourself. And then the other is early detection of disease. And those are things that are typically done with the help of a health professional. So prevention, things you can do yourself, there are many of them, but for the purposes of our talk today, I'm going to discuss three: diet, exercise, and nutritional supplements. Jack LaLanne lived past 95. He said, diet is queen, exercise is king, put them together and you have a kingdom. And I think he was right on the money with that. So in terms of the things that we can do today, diet and exercise, nutritional supplement, are things that we can do to help ourselves to slow down the aging process. This is the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama was giving an audience in the United States a few years ago, and someone raised his hand when he had the open microphone and asked the Dalai Lama, "Your Holiness, what advice can you give the people of Pittsburgh?" The Dalai Lama thought for only a moment, and he answered in 2 words. He said, "Eat less." I think this advice was accurate on many levels, because we know that eating less, reducing our calories, is the only proven method of increasing lifespan in animal experiments so far. And it has worked with the smallest species, things like yeast, things like fruit flies. It's worked in mice, and so far it's working in monkeys and chimpanzees. So we do know that reducing our calories can increase our lifespan and also increase our health span so that we can live a longer period of time and be healthy throughout it. There are not that many human experiments because of our long lifespans. It's difficult to show that caloric restriction helps, but in the Japanese island of Okinawa, they practice caloric restriction.